I'm Kay Halasek, Vice Chair for Rhetoric and Composition at Ohio State, and Associate Professor in Composition largely.
I'm Jim Fredal. I'm not the Vice Chair of Rhetoric and Composition. I'm
Yeah.
an Associate Professor. Yeah, I'm Associate Professor of Rhetoric, mostly, and not so much composition.
And both of us have taught, I think Jim, well actually this will be the second time you've taught 276, right?
Yes,
And
Introduction
I've
to Rhetoric.
taught it once, Introduction to Rhetoric, our sophomoric level, sorry.
Sophomoric class.
Sophomore, junior level Introduction to Rhetoric course, which is a precursor to some of our upper division courses in rhetoric and composition. As an introduction to rhetoric, the course is one that engages students in rhetorical analysis of public documents, so civic and public rhetorics. I don't know if that's typically, you do some classical rhetoric in yours as well. I do too. I introduce them to Aristotle and others, but it's rhetorical analysis.
It's mostly rhetorical analysis. It's mostly contemporary.
Yeah, contemporary texts.
Right.
Do you use Burke?
I do not touch Burke.
Well, I'm glad to know you don't touch Burke. But I use Burke, for example, as a sort of a method to teach students a method of rhetorical analysis. But inevitably what they do is a sort of analysis of a particular contemporary text. Visual texts for you sometimes?
Visual texts of all different genres. Letters, commercials, advertisements, songs, video clips, YouTube.
And then, so Harlot, and how do you incorporate then the possibility of, or texts, medium on Harlot in
the
class?
thing I love about Harlot, there's actually several things. I invented Harlot, you know.
Oh yeah.
Al Gore claims to have invented it.
Yeah,
It was
right.
me.
It was you.
I like one of the things that I like about Harlot is that it gets away from the impression that rhetorical analysis is this academic thing, that you need a certain vocabulary, ancient Greek vocabulary, to do rhetorical analysis. One of the things I say to my students is most of them already know most of the techniques of rhetorical analysis and can see the things that we're going to talk about in class. They just don't have the terms for it. So something like Harlot that brings rhetorical analysis out of the academy and into, not only into sort of everyday popular genres, but into sort of vernacular language, I think helps students go, oh, I've noticed that. I can do this kind of analysis. It's not just, you don't have to have an academic degree in order to discover this stuff. A lot of it is stuff that the students can already find, and they like being able to see not only that they know this stuff, but that it's actually academically valuable knowledge, and good knowledge for citizens.
I think I may go at it from a slightly different perspective, because I'll take something like Burke's dramatism, or the guilt redemption cycle, which is sort of what I latched onto when I taught the course last time, and ask them to take a contemporary text like Bush's, what is it, the Spirit of Freedom speech, the first speech that he did after 9/11, and then employ Burke to examine that particular artifact. So I might be working at it from a slightly different perspective, but Harlot is still a useful strategy then for them, because they can imagine why a public audience, someone outside of our class, for example, might be interested in analyzing Bush's speech from that perspective, because then they can take Burke and that guilt redemption cycle and use it, and then look at some other texts, like the recent texts with the $700 billion bailout, and say, okay, oh wow, look, he's doing the same thing here with this speech. John Stewart just did this the other night too, as a matter of fact, on his piece, demonstrating how Bush uses the same rhetorical strategies 4 years later, 8 years later, in that they can use that as an analytical tool. And if Harlot, might be a way to imagine how a public audience could benefit, as you were saying too, from understanding that we can do that kind of analysis, not only in the classroom, but as we move out into the civic arena.
And I think it makes students better citizens and better consumers of popular media when they start to become habituated to, whenever they see, anything on internet, television, video, whatever, that those terms of analysis, those methods and concepts like redemption cycle or ethos path, whatever, So now they can say, oh, you know,
That's what
I see what they're doing. I know what's technique that they're doing. The other thing I like is that it encourages students to participate, to see rhetorical analysis as part of a larger conversation. That when we are in conversation with other people, their perspectives are going to be different from ours. They're going to see things that we wouldn't. And when we can participate in a larger group, and this is why it's great in a classroom, but the classroom is limited because you only meet so often, and then they're done with the course and it's over. Well, this is like an ongoing classroom where they can see all these people giving their input. They read this person's insight and this person's insight, and those two combined give them a new idea that they wouldn't have had otherwise, and the whole becomes greater than the sum of its parts.
Well, and it also enlarges the texts then.
Right.
Not only the conversation with the texts themselves about which they might be engaging in
Right.
the conversation. The website for the Girl Scouts USA
Yeah.
might be one.
Yeah.
I mean, how can we talk about, say, identity and the gendered nature of communication and technologies? Well, you can look at something like the Girl Scout USA website and see that. I had students who were interested in Project Runway and, you know,
Right.
comparing and contrasting, looking at the television program and the website itself. And if they're engaged in those kinds of visual, right, and multimedia texts, that's something that Harlot can sustain in a
Can
conversation.
showcase.
It can,
Yeah.
can sustain and showcase in a way that, you know, our classrooms, as you say, on a day-to-day or quarterly basis can't do. And then someone
Right.
like Dan Horton, who did the piece in my class, can use Harlot, can work on his piece in my class, can strongly encourage him to revise it. He revises it and then it's published on Harlot. So he's been part of that ongoing conversation about commercialism, radio, Christmas, right, and the sort of pervasiveness of these technologies and how these technologies perpetuate certain assumptions about consumerism, sort of those sort of festivals that we practice on a daily, not daily basis, but on a seasonal basis.
Seasonal basis.
With radio.
Right.
And
Right.
of course, you know already, have you heard your first, it's what, October, it's not even October 1st, have you heard your first carol on the radio yet?
I have not.
I have.
You're kidding.
No. And see, this is one of Dan's points, right, is that sort of, you know,
But
how
I
are we
did.
being
But I
conditioned,
did see the
so.
Christmas trees at Lowe's. The trees and the ornaments are out at Lowe's. Yeah.
Hey, Merry
So it's-
Christmas.
Merry
Jeff.
Christmas.
Happy holidays.
So it's great. It's a great example of the kinds of rhetorical analysis of important contemporary discourses that I think students can learn a lot about and should be doing. And it's also kind of, I think, exciting to be able to say to a classroom, you know, you can publish on this thing. You can send your stuff. It doesn't have to be this, you know, distant academic journal that's completely out of your reach. And you can have it in video format, you can have music, you can have images, you can, you know.
Well, I mean, one of the things in my pedagogy over all of these years that I've really tried to emphasize in my own teaching, I know other people try to emphasize as well, is the sort of real-world nature of writing and rhetoric.
Right.
And this is a perfect opportunity for that.
Yeah.
And it's hip, and it's engaging, and it's timely. And that's why, you know, I think that someone, you know, they keep using Dan as this example, but Dan or the students who are looking at the Girl Scout website and stuff, they can really not only imagine, but actually have a real audience for the work that they're
Right.
doing. You know, and they don't have to believe me anymore, or just believe me when I say there are really people out there who are interested
gonna read
in
this.
these kinds of things, and
Right.
it's important to become active in that conversation.
Right.
They can now see it actually there in Harlot.
Yeah, and it's just a lot more exciting to be able to say that than imagine you're.
Turn your- yeah, or turn your
imagine you're the
paper
author of a journal article. Imagine your audience. Well, now we have an actual audience out there. So I'm happy to have invented
So
it.
good.
I'm glad you invented it. That's cool.